series at other webinars too. You'll all know the drill with Zoom now, but always worth saying, as you're joining, please just introduce yourself on the chat stream. If you open the chat along the bottom of your screen, open the chat along the bottom of the screen, and then just change it should naturally be set to all panelists. If you just change that to all panelists and attendees, we can all see you introducing yourself, say where you're from and your name. We're going to make this as interactive as possible, so there are questions we'll probably ask you as we go through and Max delivers the content, and feel free to post questions as we head along. Lovely morning. There you go, Laura, you're off the bat introducing from MenCap. Good to see everyone saying hi. Lovely. And we've got someone from your team on there as well, Max, so you're going to be held very accountable. You can jump in and heckle if you feel like it.
Please don't heckle.
So yes, welcome everyone, welcome Vicky, to all joining. So as I said, please open up your chat box and change it to all panelists and attendees so that we can all introduce yourselves. You all will know how Zoom works today. Please feel free to post questions as we go through the session. Max and I will be chatting along, and we'll respond back as we get those things through. In terms of who I'm joined by today, so Max, I'm going to say we're a new friendship, aren't we? We've only kind of worked directly together since you joined at Shelter, but I think it's been deep and intense in that 6-month period that we've known each other.
It's been emotional.
I mean, I'm constantly emotional, Max, so I'm glad you feel the same. So Max is head of community fundraising at Shelter. He has been in the charity sector for the last 20 years, although obviously, no one would believe that. You look so young and energetic still. And he's been leading teams at organisations like British Red Cross. So has gained some really useful experience to emergency appeal fundraising, which we'll touch on as we go through the kind of webinar and how that's helped his team. But you may already know, and obviously from our marketing, but Max's team has performed brilliantly over the last 7 months. It's been such an incredibly tough time for community, but his team has kind of been able to pivot really quickly into virtual stewardship, and really changing their approach to community fundraising, which has left them in a position where they're 60% over target, which is amazing. Max is onboarding new staff members at the moment, so it's a real positive news story. And what we're going to do today is give you insight into the kind of decisions that helped create that ability to achieve that success, so that you can take it back to your organisations. And I think with everything, there are obviously going to be people on here who've been on furlough and things like that, and so it's natural to feel like community has completely changed and there's not kind of optimism for the future, but there really is. And that's what we want to kind of spread today. For those of you who haven't worked with me before, so I'm Ashby from Ashby Jenkins Recruitment. We are a specialist recruitment agency looking after fundraising, digital and innovation roles throughout the entire UK. And this webinar series was one of the ways that, when everything was at its very worst, we kind of launched into supporting the sector. So we've aimed to kind of cover issues that are challenging the sector and give inspiration. We've got a webinar coming up about digital fundraising in a couple of weeks, so it's really worth you all logging onto that, and I will send the link through at the end. And we also have blogs and things on adapting skill sets and provide training. So if you need any support with your kind of team or anything like that, you know where we are. We still do day-to-day recruitment as well as all this marketing activity. So do reach out to me. So that's kind of that. Max, did I miss anything off there? Anything that I should say?
No, that's good. You're doing the slides.
Yes, yeah, don't
Awesome.
worry. I will open this up. Last week was the first week that I actually had a problem with this. So okay. Luckily it's all working this week. That's great.
Awesome.
I had to fill for about 40 seconds where I was trying to keep my face calm. So
that's
Max,
when you do the jokes.
Yeah, well, all the best jokes. So this is you. So shall we head into the second slide?
And I guess also just to say, I've attended several of your webinars that you've had during lockdown, and I found them really, really helpful for me and for our team. And I can only hope that this one is some way as helpful as some of those. And also Ashby's been really, really brilliant, helping us with some recruitment recently. And if you need recruitment, I couldn't recommend Ashby highly enough.
Oh, thank you.
She paid me to say that.
I did, yeah, I
did. So I'm Max Newton. I'm head of community fundraising at Shelter. I was 11 and a half years at the British Red Cross. At all levels of community fundraising, from sort of on the ground regional fundraiser to sort of senior management levels. Shelter, give you a bit of background about community fundraising at Shelter, is that until sort of 2017, 2018, there wasn't a community fundraising department. So the organisation wanted to test whether we could gain support in communities by putting people in, community fundraisers in across the country. Trialled it in a few areas, in 4 areas, and was a success. And so then had great growth plans to really build the team and build the department, and part of that was getting a head of in. So that's one of the things that really attracted me to this role, was to build the team. And so I applied. I got the role. I served out my notice period at the Red Cross. Had a 4 days off in between, and in that time I watched the world turn upside down, which is next slide.
Yeah.
Sorry, there we go. Which is the world turn upside down, and really, really turn upside down, as you all know. And my last sort of times at the Red Cross were writing plans of what could community fundraisers do if we can't go out into the public and do fundraising in the community. And then and came to Shelter, and really obviously turned upside down.
Max, did you start on the 1st of April at Shelter? Is that right?
I did start on the 1st of April. Yeah.
Okay,
April Fool's Day, which some might say is quite apt, and proper sort of lockdown baby. The team had done scenario planning for worst case scenario due to lockdown and moderate case already. We paused recruitment plans, so the plan was I would start and would be recruiting to up to 15 roles within the first few months. That was paused. I was quite frankly, grateful that I had a role and that I could start, because I was worried about that for a bit. We started. We paused our plans, and we tried to pivot and be agile and be flexible and see what we could do. And I think hopefully an interesting thing about our situation, and I wouldn't pretend that we've got all the answers, but we'll sort of talk about what happened to us and how we worked with the situation, and hopefully that has some benefit for you guys watching. But I think one of the interesting things is that we are obviously a big national organisation, but it was a small new community fundraising department, so 6 members of staff plus me, not everywhere across the country at the stage, and without a national product or products or national campaigns or things like that. So we were a small team.
It must be quite hard as well, Max, because obviously at the level you're coming in, you're having to influence everyone really quickly and build rapport. And I know we'll talk about kind of furlough as we go through the presentation, because that's obviously been impacted loads of organisations. But it must have been hard just getting in and networking across all of the organisations whilst everyone's in panic mode, basically.
Yeah, it was, but also it was easier to do than I thought it might have been. So I'm based in Sheffield, and a lot of the heads of departments that I would need to be, there were internal stakeholders that I would need to build good relationships with, tends to be based in London. So with everybody working at home from laptops, I didn't need to travel to London to do that. I think as an organisation, everybody quickly adapted to the working from home scenario, and having meetings that way and meeting with people that way. And for me, it was all of a sudden there was no meeting that I couldn't be at due to being geographically dispersed from anywhere else. And that was really great to build those relationships quickly, and I think also actually to move along things quickly. So I think part of the stuff that's been successful has been about not being perhaps bound by the previous processes and systems and the way of doing it. But actually, if I can get a video call on with the head of corporate, we can say what we need to do, what the challenges are, and come to a solution for that really quickly.
Great. Let's move on to the next slide then, I guess. So give us a bit of an overview, because this is really exciting for the kind of performance so far.
Yeah, so so year to date, we'd raised £514,000 as community fundraising department. So the 236 is our Q0 budget, so our COVID budget. Our year runs April to April, and the 315 was the pre-COVID year to date income target. So you can see, obviously, doing incredibly well, which is amazing. And they're the areas where we've got regional fundraisers, and HQ is everywhere else. So where we don't have regional fundraisers yet, they're supported by a couple of people in the national team, but also actually during this time, people in other areas have picked up activity and supporters in different parts of the country. So I've got it on to show that, you know, we're doing really well, but also we're doing really well in all the areas. It's not sort of skewed by one particular area doing incredibly well.
It's interesting to see in Scotland as well, because we've worked with them, Children's First, who's another who's a Scottish charity, and they said they definitely felt like there was a real push towards them being supported because they were a national charity supporting Scotland. But obviously you work in Scotland and England, so it's nice to see that you've still got that kind of good increased level of support from Scottish audiences.
Yeah, and the Scotland line at the bottom is sort of everywhere else in Scotland, apart from Glasgow and Edinburgh. Sort of goes into there at the moment. And so, yeah, as a result, we had 5 regional fundraisers, 4 regional fundraisers, sorry, and Scotland is covered by an assistant role, and then partly by the 2 regional fundraisers, and we had an assistant role based in our head office in London, who tended to cover a lot of the HQ stuff. But what we did was started to share the HQ activity, which is activity in parts of the country where we don't have regional fundraisers, around the guys that we had in post. And so, yeah, so as a result, we have been recruiting. So we've been recruiting for 8 new roles, so to put more regional fundraisers in around the country, and management level as well, and also to a national team.
Just I'll pop onto the next slide, Max, and then I'll ask another question, or maybe I shouldn't. Let's go back. I don't want to reveal it all at once. In terms of, because I guess there are people on this webinar who are leading teams, and guys, if you've got specific questions, please do feel free to ask them as we go through. But at that point where everything's turned upside down, community teams across the sector have been brutally furloughed and then being pushed into kind of redundancies and severe cutbacks. How do you then persuade senior leadership to continue investing in community? You know, were there any kind of key tips that you could give people to kind of get your directors on board with why it's still a valuable income stream?
It's a good question. I think from my perspective, I think a lot of the challenges that we as a type of fundraising face is lack of understanding of what community fundraising is. I've sat in quite a few meetings with people that have been in the same organisation as me for a long time, and so what does community fundraising do? And it can be difficult to define because it tends to be bits of everything. So we've I think at Shelter, we've tried to really define what community fundraising is, and it really is around, I mean, it sounds obvious, but, you know, building support in the communities to contribute to raising income, but also to building a movement, building a movement locally to fundraise, but also to try and create some change and campaign for change. So linking quite closely with our campaigning or the campaigning parts of the organisation. But also at the start of lockdown, so when I joined, or sort of just after the start of lockdown, we did have the conversations about furloughing. And initially, the 2 people initially it was I couldn't be furloughed because I wouldn't qualify for the scheme, and I could keep one other person. But actually we had more discussions, and you know what, we'd just seen a bit of an uptick in activity. Like activity dropped off the face of the earth initially, and we just started to see a bit of an uptick. And from dozens of emergency appeals at British Red Cross, we had a discussion, because what we almost always noticed was that most emergency appeals were a single catastrophic event, usually overseas, and it would happen. The corporate team and maybe major donors and individual givers would see all the initial activity in action, and we'd be sat there in community going, nothing's happening. We need to make something happen. We need to go out and create activity. And then it seemed there'd be a bit of a lag. And I think probably by the time people have it's registered what's happened, they've registered they want to do something about it, perhaps talk to some friends or colleagues at work, what could they do about it, and then come to us, and worked out what they could do and then come to us. And I think that's definitely the case here for us. And but also it wasn't a single catastrophic event. It was one that was unfolding over a period of time, and we were also part of it. So that lag would really be longer, and it would take more time to happen. So we had those conversations. Fortunately, my manager took what I was saying on board, and we sort of pushed back and didn't furlough as many of the team as we were initially asked to. And I'm really, really grateful that we were able to do that, because we did see a big uptick in activity, and part of that is we saw a big uptick in activity. We get I think, a sentiment tracker, which Shelter gets information about public sentiment about all sorts of things to do with the lockdown and the pandemic. But part of that is about people's what causes people think are most relevant to the pandemic, and then also what charities might want to support in those causes. And we also knew, and from that we knew that homelessness was a highly ranking cause, but it wasn't the top three, wasn't the top 3 or 4, but it was up there. So we sort of, I guess, from that knowledge and experience, and from that data, and from a bit of gut instincts and what we were seeing, we sort of thought that if people want to do something to help, which we were seeing everywhere on the news, that people wanted to do something just to help, and if they wanted to, one of the ways that people can do that is by raising money. And if homelessness is an issue, then what we need to do is to be able to keep talking to people, not to tell them what to do necessarily, but just to be in contact with people and to be keeping talking to people, which is what we tried to do. And we unfurloughed the furloughees as quickly as we could, really, because we were too busy, the team were too busy, and we needed to be able to keep talking to people.
And I guess the important thing here for everyone else on that unit, if you're going through consultation periods at the moment in terms of looking at what your team, whether you need to make cutbacks in your teams or whatever, is probably worth just thinking about that. Like, people have more disposable income because we're going on less holidays, generally. Obviously there's pinch points happening in recession, but to still have those relationships going and to make a real case for that, based on that sentiment. So let's move on.
And I think there's I was going to say, I think there's some reports out today that charitable giving had increased during the early days of the pandemic, sort of generally across the board, because I think people can see what's happening and want to do something to help, and can't perhaps physically go out and help people, although obviously a lot of that was happening with COVID support groups, but usually the easiest way that people can do something to help is by raising money or donating.
I think it's just pushing back upwards, isn't it, and kind of making sure your leadership is really bought into that plan. So key success factors, Max. So let's talk through what's kind of led to this. So what did you pivot into really quickly?
Yeah, and so apologies to my team for this very attractive photo of them on the right. We found new ways to engage new and existing audiences, and a couple of really good examples of that was around Facebook fundraising and social media. So Facebook fundraising sat in the community fundraising team. No, sorry, Lindsay. Facebook fundraising sat in the community fundraising team, but nothing had been done with it to steward those people whatsoever. And so we couldn't do this stuff over here let's put time and resource into this stuff over here where we could do that, and we could do it from home. And so we quickly devised a plan, allocated, we had the training, and we were able to start stewarding supporters on Facebook fundraising, and saw a huge increase, huge spike in money raised from Facebook birthday fundraisers primarily, but not limited to that. And that led to us having conversations about, I wrote on here Conversocial, which is basically a platform that's a bit like Hootsuite, that allows you to see lots of different social media platforms in one place. And again, I'll talk a lot about sort of adult conversations that we had with other members of the team, other members of the organization. We had adult conversations with the social media team about how actually could we start looking after supporters in that space. So at the time, the social media team, somebody wanted to raise money for us or express some interest in raising money for us. The social media team did a great job, but they would say, great, send us your email address or telephone number and we'll get a member of the team to call you back. And obviously that's not ideal. We'd be talking to them a few days later, not on the platform that they wanted to communicate with us with, and we're missing out. And so we was able to get the team onto Conversocial, which meant they could interact with people on all the social media platforms as Shelter, and give people, their skill, give people their advice and the benefit of their skills and experience to turn them from, to make them great fundraisers for us out in the community on the platform they want to communicate with us on, and really timely as well. And almost immediately it saw some real good successes where I think Lindsay, who's on the call, it found out that a school just around the corner was doing some fundraising, and we wouldn't have known about that probably before, but she was able to dig deeper on it and steward those people, and then actually I think have a virtual video call with them. It's called Conversocial. Is the platform. There's a few others out there that do a similar thing, and we can set it up for keywords, so any words that are fundraising related, or even like I'd like to do something to help, I don't know what, get streamed to that platform where our fundraisers see it, so we don't see people contacting us about homelessness issues or housing issues. I saw another question pop up, and yeah, the fundraisers were acting as Shelter, so they interact with people as the Shelter main accounts on Facebook and Insta and Twitter, and it's been really, really good. The team have also adapted to just doing a lot of stuff that they would normally do in real life virtually. So Rotary clubs, schools, we're still having meetings and assemblies. NCS, National Citizenship Service Groups, were they were still wanting to do stuff. They were still wanting to do fundraising. And I think, like I mentioned before, what we needed to do was to find just ways to keep talking to them and engaging with them. And so the team have been on virtual meetings, virtual assemblies. Lindsay's joined in singing at school virtual assemblies, which you'll love me for saying. So that's been really good. The team have been brilliant, and they've been brilliant at adapting and changing and with all this.
Did you say you might touch on this, Max, later, but did you say that you also filmed really quickly, like virtual thanking videos, virtual good luck videos?
Yeah, definitely. So one was around optimizing support experience, which we part of the, we were really set. I'll step back a bit. Part of the success was, and we did really well with the 2.6 challenge, where again it could have sat in the events team, and we had again adult conversation. It sat with us due to resource, and one of the things that we wanted to do was sort of go say, you know what, these might be the only supporters that we get coming to us. We don't actually know what's going to happen after this. Let's do everything we possibly can to make the most of these supporters, to help them raise as much money as possible, to make them feel as loved and wanted by Shelter as possible, and to so that they'll fundraise for us again or do other things for us again. And part of that was how we could do that virtually, and members of the team are really keen on producing videos. There was one, Emma, in fact, who's top left on the screen, said we should saw another charity had created a video to promote the 2.6 challenge. She said, we can do this. And it'll be great. And nobody really believed her, including me, and she didn't get much traction with it. But she persisted. She and put something together, and actually it got amazing internal buy-in, so that everybody from chief executive down to the cleaner were sending videos of them, to submitting videos for our promotional video. Got loads of internal engagement and buy-in, and people taking part, and also advocating for us externally with people they were talking to. And we had great videos to share on social media and stuff. And then the next bit that came from that, and about optimizing the supporter experience, was we did bespoke video welcome videos, bespoke thank you and good luck videos, bespoke thank you afterwards videos. We had some very, very fun Zoom calls, which this is a screenshot from one where instruments came out, pans came out, I think dogs and cats made an appearance at various points, and they went down incredibly well, super well with our supporters, and we've kept doing that since. Also very, very well with some of our regional corporate supporters, and in fact supporters of the national corporate team, and we've continued to do that. And another bit of that was we couldn't invite people to our hubs, to our offices, to see our services. So we set up virtual hub open days, which again have been really popular. Popular with those that attended, popular with those that just loved that we invited them to it to say thank you. And we've had people with lived experience talking at them, people who deliver our services, chief executive at as well. And that's felt a brilliant way to engage people. Yeah, really popular internally as well.
Which
awesome.
months did you roll that stuff out, Max? So how quickly were you able to start doing the virtual tours?
We probably had our first one probably in May. The first one was to thank people specifically to thank people who took part in the 2.6 challenge. But then, yeah, we've had 3 or 4 since then, and they've built in popularity, and yeah, have been really, really popular, and become bigger, and more people have attended. And it's also been great stuff for the team to work on, and really, and I think all good community fundraisers love speaking to supporters, and it feels like your arm's been cut off if you're not able to do so, and it provided a good opportunity for us to do that, and then follow up with it as well and keep people going. Cool. We also there were new audiences that we were able to focus on. So faith and education, for example, didn't sit with community fundraising. So again, we had those adult conversations, and we've got to have a really good culture that I think comes from the director of income generation to have those conversations. And so that was, again, something that we could focus on in lieu of the stuff that we couldn't do. Just very, very quickly, supermarket funds and some of the local funding opportunities. We similar with the 2.6 challenge, we was able to really focus on, jump on, throw as much at it as possible, and then really ride the wave afterwards. And I think income that we could directly attribute to 2.6 challenge was about £80,000, but we saw, but probably it's between 150 and 200,000 pounds, because we just made so much noise and talked to so many supporters across the organisation about it, that people just, we built that activity and built that momentum. Somebody said about where did we host the virtual tours? We did them on Zoom. Some of our other virtual stuff, for the directorate, we've been using Fundraising Everywhere, which has been a really good platform, but we have been using Zoom for the virtual hub tours. We can move on to the next slide.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so what you learn over this time.
Yeah, thank you. So I learned to. So this is like for me specifically, like really to listen and learn, particularly from my team. We could have missed out on something that was actually really, really special if we didn't listen or continued to not listen to Emma, who had suggested the films. And that's one example, but there was lots that came from my team and other teams throughout this time.
Would you say, Max, that COVID has kind of allowed hierarchies within Shelter, you know, and I'm not saying you were a hierarchical organisation beforehand, to break down a little bit so that everyone's voice is now heard, so and listened to?
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good point. And during those, particularly during those first sort of two months, we had I think we had a community catch up almost like, I think we had one every other day, because it was such a fast moving environment. And every day or every other day, and you know, me and the rest of the team were all there, and everybody, you know, had equal voice to suggest ideas, to discuss them, to knock them around. Sometimes some of my things I thought were a great idea, we didn't do because the members of the team, from their experience, thought that they weren't. I'm not right all the time, which is something, is definitely linked to that. Absolutely. And that's also the case in terms of me or members of my team talking to other departments to find solutions, because sort of like I couldn't do everything. In some cases, I perhaps tried to do everything and perhaps would need to delegate more to members of the team, which is definitely a thing, another learning for me.
Would you, because as well, like in terms of your supporter feedback, did you actively reach out to the communities, ask them how they wanted to hear from you, what they wanted from you? Was that a part of the strategy?
Initially not so much, but we were finding that people would come up with their own ideas of how they wanted to support us, and it was our job to make sure that they knew that they could support Shelter, and then help them do that to the best of their ability. But since then, we, particularly with sort of faith audience and education audience, they had been looked after by the individual giving department and had been quite transactional relationships. So that, you know, there was winter mailings and Easter mailings, and we've taken that on board with support from the individual giving team, and absolutely doing that. So our initial contacts with them are to ask, you know, what would you like to do? What would you like to support Shelter? How would you like to do it? How could we help you do the stuff that you want to do, you know, in your around your church, or around your mosque, or around your school? You know, what do you need from us, and how can we work together on it? So we've got mailings going out and conversations going out, definitely to do that, to find that out.
Because I know someone sent us a message and said what works for schools fundraising at the moment. So I guess it's just listen to your audience, like ask them, get their input. User created content is something that we're going to be talking about quite a lot in our digital webinar too. So I think it all relates.
I think with schools, we've done quite well with schools and NCS groups. They've, you know, young people are pretty amazing, and they're much more adaptable, as I know from my children, than I am, and you know, much more in touch with how to turn things digitally. And we've found that they've been able to find, if we can inspire them to support us and keep talking to them, they've been able to find the ways of turning what they would have done in real life to doing it virtually or doing it in their bubbles. But definitely asking them, you know, being led by them is definitely a big part of it as well. I've got a picture of Luke Skywalker because I'm a massive Star Wars fan, and also, you know, there's a bit about you know, yes, we get the data, and yes, you know, there's the research and stuff, but also sometimes we just need to trust in our experiences and our instincts even, and that can be our collective instincts and our collective experiences from the group. But sometimes we couldn't wait for the data all the time, and we need to just go for it and perhaps stick our head above the parapet and take a leap of faith. Supporter experience, I'm a big fan of the positive impacts of optimizing supporter experience wherever possible. And I would highly recommend anybody to follow Leslie Pinder on Twitter or LinkedIn, who leads the supporter experience team at the British Red Cross, to try and embed optimizing supporter experience across all income streams, and in fact across all the organization. And there's a lot of hard data about, if you can optimize that, you will raise more money from charity and commercial sector. I can't remember what Give It to Them Straight was. Oh, Give It to Them Straight was I got a bit I started to have some more fun with my slides. Was around and I can't remember what it was.
Star Wars reference just made you be like, reference. Oh my gosh.
Was a big bit was a thing that was really successful for us early doors was just picking up the phone or starting that video call with people and just having that straight conversation with people straight away and not waiting for the meeting or the process or the system, which again a bit about what you mentioned about sort of not having that hierarchy, but also not being bound by the old ways of working as much as possible. People will find a way was that our supporters will find a way of doing something. Like I just put like lots of people talked around being agile and pivoting is like people saying it all the time, but what does it actually mean? And yeah, I think we were good at doing that, and in really, really granular ways, but also in larger ways of turning all our attention from one thing to another.
I definitely think so. Like 4 years ago, strategic partnerships was the buzzword of the sector. That was like 2016's word, whereas 2020's word is pivot. Definitely. I've never heard it in a fundraising context before, like March. And then it was just like boom.
And an interesting thing was around that we've noticed, that I've definitely noticed, is almost like every time the external, the lockdown situation has changed, whether that be going into more lockdown or less lockdown, there seemed to be a big drop off in activity. And my assumption is that that's when everything changes for people. You need to get used to a new way of living and working, and that means that perhaps fundraising isn't the first thing on people's minds. But so I guess it's an observation really, that it just seems to follow that there's a drop off and then it picks up again once people get used to the new situation that they find themselves in, whether that be at home or work or sort of social life.
It is moving into that acceptance. And I think one thing that's really important for us all to kind of keep in mind is we're at where we are now, but things are going to continue changing. You know, we're going into different states of lockdown, we're coming out, there may be a vaccine. You know, you have to keep that agile mentality and be able to, it's really easy, it's really natural for us to grab onto a new thing and be like, well, this is the way it is moving forward, and this is what I need my skill set to be. Where 18 months time we could go back into a really traditional methodology. So it's just kind of making sure, I guess the organizations that have done really well over this are those ones that are keen to keep learning, keep developing, know their skill sets can be adjustable.
Absolutely.
Cool. Next slide.
And being aware that it will change. I think somebody put a question about what schools have been doing, or young people have been doing, and it's like everything. So sort of sponsored events, which could be something like at home sponsored events, running up and down the stairs. People doing relays, running across from coast to coast across the country, but doing it around. Some people doing it around their garden. Some people doing it on a running machine, and so on. Really finding ways to. Sometimes actually what we could engage them with was perhaps one of our local campaigns. We had a really good local campaign lived by an amazing gentleman called Reese, who's a guy with lived experience, and it was to campaign and set up petitions for better social housing, I think it was. And we was able to link with that team, an NCS group, decided they wanted to push up the number of signatures on this petition, filmed a video for Reese. And it was a lovely video of them just talking to camera to Reese. He received it on his mobile phone, recorded and sent one back straight away. They got really behind the campaigning and then started doing some fundraising. And so I guess there's a bit around sort of not going, you're our fundraisers, you can only do fundraising. We don't want you to do the other stuff if it means you're not going to raise the money. Actually chilling out a bit, like us chilling out a bit around some of that stuff, as well as asking other people too. Was really important. People doing all sorts of things. We had a grandfather with his grandchild who were collecting flowers from the garden, pressing them and giving them Latin names. And it was a lovely story. And he sent us the book, and it was amazing. I think Alfred and Harry were the guys. Also, people making stuff and selling stuff, and using the different platforms to sell stuff. It's just amazing what people can come up with.
Great. And we just had a question directly, Max, but I think we'll pick that up at the end and the summary. So things you would have done differently. This is always the juicy bits that everyone likes hearing.
Yeah.
So what horrible mistakes did you make? What did you do differently?
Things that I would have definitely done differently. I think I've touched on, I felt like so much in it and involved in everything, and definitely should have taken more time to step back and reflect. And I think that probably leads into all the other different things. It could be so much, and not feeling like I didn't have time to do that. I did have time to do that. I totally could have done that more. Impacted on my ability to bring the team along with me on some things, perhaps on certain different projects or income streams or ways of working and things like that. Also meant that perhaps in some cases might have overlooked whether we need to upskill the team on some things, because they're actually looking at doing something really different to what they've been brought in to do, what they've been recruited to do, and what they've been told the job was. And even though everything is turned upside down, and even though everything's changing and everything's really busy, actually there's a lot more training out there and abilities to learn out there, perhaps than there was before. Partly because people like yourself have been putting on webinars for people. I think I put down about leadership styles. I think there's a lot of talk in the sector and more widely around being led by your team, and obviously, that more collaborative way of leading a team and being part of the team. And you know what, perhaps actually at that time, I definitely went down that line. And I think actually at that time, probably that's not what was needed, or not needed by everybody. And perhaps actually needed me to be, as a leader, to be more clear and defined and directive, I think. But also almost conversely, there's a lot of complex emotions and feelings out there at the moment. Some of them around the whole furloughing situation of the people that have been furloughed and then coming back, also amongst the guys that haven't been furloughed. We also, obviously decided to do recruitment and to push on with the recruitment, and it's a positive thing and it's a good thing, but there's all sorts of other complex emotions bound up with that, with everything else, with the obviously working from home situation and things like that. And taking, if I'd have stepped back and reflected more, could have taken more care to take those into account and plan perhaps some of the communications around that and conversations to have around that, if that makes sense.
It's interesting as well, because I think a lot of that does link really nicely back to that step back and reflect point, because I think for me personally, like being really in like, we need to do this is, we need to focus, we need to be really proactive, more productive than ever before. Actually, like, you can't see the wood from the trees, and it's now now I've literally said that to some of the team, like, it's only now that I can step back and be like, yes, I should have done that. But it is all of that. If you're too in something, you can't be aware of all of the leadership styles.
Absolutely. And definitely sort of part of that is listening to what other people are telling you, or what other people are saying sort of around you. And we've with my line manager and two of the other heads of challenge events and heads of special events, we've been doing insight profile training, and I'm definitely a red, and so which is sort of action and dynamic and stuff, and what I need to do is more perhaps of the green of the reflecting and stepping back and reflecting and taking that time out.
I think it's also on that as well, because we did a webinar on insight, so you can go and look at that on YouTube, anyone that's not had that experience before. But it's worth being really mindful as well when you are hiring, to hire in people that complement but aren't exactly the same as you, because you need all of that. So no, that's really, really interesting. I'll share the link round at the end with everyone as well, so that you can find that really easily. Great. And then, so key advice that you'd give to community fundraising leaders out there at the moment?
So one of the things I like to do in my spare time is ultramarathon running, which
such a weird concept to me that someone likes to do that. And the last two
involved running 200 plus miles, one across Scotland and one in a tunnel in the southwest. And I was doing some thinking about sort of things that actually I've learned. So I learned from fundraising, but also from running, or perhaps put it in that perspective or framing it like that. So one is around like it's just being bold and taking that leap of faith of sticking your head and just going for it. Like you almost can't. This photo was midway through a race across Scotland, Angela, and coming out of a checkpoint, and yeah, being bolder and just going for it. You know, signing up and going for it and taking that leap of faith. And it's scary. It's big and scary, and you're not sure if you can do it, but sometimes you just got to do it and go for it, and you don't know whether you can do it until you try. There's definitely stuff around not being restricted by what the organization or society tells you are the best you can do, the maximum. You know, 26.2 miles is a long distance, and massive respect to anybody that runs it, but you know, it's not the furthest you can run. And equally, you know, generally increasing our income budget by 3% every year isn't the best that community fundraising can do. You know, we want to achieve transformational change in community fundraising and income generation at Shelter, and also not being restricted by the old ways of doing it, or you know, the systems or the processes. Definitely looking for the bright spots out there. So I'd hugely recommend in the fundraising context, looking for other people that are doing good things in your areas of work and learning from them. Like, get out there and do networking. It feels easier to do networking during this lockdown. So like on these webinars, on LinkedIn, in other places, but like finding the people that are doing something that you want to aspire to do. There was always people that ran further than me and were better than me, and so I could learn from them. A thing a colleague said to me at the Red Cross actually at the start of lockdown was that she couldn't see the wood for the trees, and there's definitely something around like when it's all turned upside down and it seems such a massive, and it's just horrible out there, and it seems such a big unobtainable objective at the end to get through this and to get there. That almost like you just can't do it. You could like freeze, and it can be debilitating and disabling. But actually, sometimes it's just to pick from tree to tree and just to go from tree to tree and like trust your instincts and just go that way to pick your way around and keep going. Definitely to have those plans, but be aware that the plans, like your plans will be thrown up in the air, but they're most useful for when things are all going wrong rather than when things are going right. And yeah, definitely to ask for help and not be too proud to do so is definitely something I could do more of. There's a saying in ultramarathon running is not to pack up going into a checkpoint. And this is really this point and the next point is not when you're going into a checkpoint is perhaps after you've just done 30 miles of running or something over hills and mountains, and you feel awful and the world's against you, you're physically wrecked, you're emotionally wrecked. That's not the time you want to give in. Don't give in then. Have a break, get yourself patched up, speak to some friends, surrender and let people help you. People want to help you and let people help you. Go to bed, stop working, look at it again fresh tomorrow, because actually when you've spent your time in your own personal and professional checkpoint, then you can be ready to go at it again and then assess the situation. So yeah, definitely like look after yourself and find the thing that you can enjoy in the situation. It's pretty horrible, and I've got like some really good friends that have had like redundancy conversations with people, and it is really horrible. But something somewhere in the situation, the whole situation is something to enjoy, even if that's how amazing would it be if we can pull this off? If we can get there, this would be amazing. And to try and find a way of holding on to that, because, and I guess finally that it will be over. Like all runs, whatever the distance, there will be a time when we're not having these conversations around this, and it'll be a memory. And we've just got to keep going, and there'll be a time, whether that be leading a team and raising more money, or be finding a new job. And when the competition out there is incredible for any roles that are out there, that there will be a time when this bit of everything is finished.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't give up.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. And I think, I've been recruiting into the sector for like 6 years. So I've seen people lose out on a job they absolutely really wanted, and then 5 months later find something that works out much better for them. Just because it seems bad now doesn't mean that it will always be that way. And Max, you touched a lot on kind of networking and utilising peer-to-peers. If people on here don't feel like they've got the broadest network and you want introductions to other charities, do drop me an email afterwards and let me know, because if there's a likelihood that I know someone in there that I might be able to put you in touch with, and I always am really keen to kind of facilitate that shared learning, which is why we wanted to do these webinars in the first place, and particularly this one with Max, so that people in community can kind of take away some key bits. So yes, and then we've got the thank you. So I'll stop sharing now. Anyone, if I know people have asked questions as they've run through, if anyone's got any last minute questions, we can take them. Someone's asked about Facebook fundraising, and if people are finding it performing well for them, do respond to that if you've got it. But if you've got anything specific for Max, just let me know. And then Max, the one question that I thought would be nice to kind of have at the end is the one we were sent. So over the last 7 months, you shared a couple of examples. What kind of fundraising story stood out most for you in terms of that warmed your heart more than others?
I guess one amazing one that was Aberdeen Rotary. So it's they weren't excuse me, they weren't part of the 2.6 challenge, but they're clearly inspired by it. And yeah, there's lots of good things about it. So Aberdeen's not an area where we've got a regional fundraiser, but I think Emma in our team, who covers Glasgow, or it might have been, I think it was Emma, did a virtual talk to them. So using that technology, and actually she'd also started using some real amazing tips that we developed around storytelling, and it's doing amazing sort of storytelling to them. And so there's about 12 members who all did something amazing, and they sent us some amazing photos. So there was like a 75-year-old woman who did 26 minutes hula hooping a day. There was a 90-year-old guy who did 26 minutes punching his punch bag a day, and sent a picture of him in his boxing vest and shorts and gloves, yes, and big mop of white hair, like Boris Johnson's dad, like white hair. There was I think Mavis, her name was, who walked around her garden with the Zimmer frame, and it was just so lovely. I think they raised about £4,000 or £5,000. It was so lovely. We, with their permission, we shared it around the Income Generation Directorate, and everybody fell in love with these people and wanted them as their grandparents. Could they adopt them? And we did. Again, we filmed a virtual thank you for them, thank you videos for them, which they loved. We shared with them some of the comments from that people have made from the directorate around their fundraising, which they also loved. And now they're much more regular supporters with us, and hopefully will be for the longer term. I think that was one that was particularly lovely. But I also. Or can I say one more?
No.
Okay,
no,
fair enough.
No, just because we're running. Yeah, feel free to message Matt. You can write it down, and I'll share it with everyone at the end. Okay. Max will give us a few highlights. But yes, it is 5:02, so we'll let everyone head off. But thank you so much for coming. I hope that you've all found that really useful to hear that kind of inspiration from Max and what his team did. I will send around the links to all the slides so that you've got them, and I will CC Max into that email address. So if you do have specific questions, you can reach out to him. However, obviously be mindful he's leading a team, so he is a busy guy. And then I mentioned the couple of webinars that we've got coming up. So we've got one on D&I next week, which would be really interesting for anyone who's working within a charity to attend. We're doing that with Michelle Clark from the Children's Society. And then we have one on digital fundraising, which would be really useful for anyone in community events looking to kind of broaden your skill set to the new way of working. I'd be remiss if I didn't say, if you have any recruitment needs, you know where we are. Max gave us a little endorsement at the beginning, which is great. So thank you everyone for attending, and thank you, Max, so much for coming on and sharing and putting together that content. It was really, really useful.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. All right. Bye, everyone.